Good evening, Halston. Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Tuesday, June 1st, 2021. This evening we have an agenda that will include reorganization of the Select Board. So without any delay at this point, I would like to make a motion to nominate Ms. Tina Hine as the Select Board Chairwoman.
I will second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. I'd like to make a motion to make Mr. Benjamin Sarah the Vice Chairman of the Select Board.
I will second that motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
And I would like to make a motion to nominate John Cronin for Clerk of the Select Board.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Hine, the board is yours.
Thank you. Pull up the agenda. Well, congratulations, John and John, for your win last Tuesday.
And to you, thank you.
And to all the candidates who won, and to all the candidates who ran. It's good to have contested races, good to give voters choices, and I think we had a good turnout, all things considered, by previous years. I think
We'd always like to see more.
so to have crowd. Okay. So tonight, second on our agenda will be the Halston Police Department Sergeant candidate interviews, and we are going to start with Officer Charette. Good evening, officer.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Hi.
Yes, please, take a seat.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Mr. Hearn, Ms. Hine, Mr. Cronin, Mr. Farrell. I was just making sure I had pronunciation. I was looking at the signs.
Well, thank you for coming in for the interview, so you know why you're here.
I do.
Be interviewed by each of the three of us for the position of sergeant in the Halston Police Department. So is there anything you'd like to introduce about yourself first, or would you like us to get started right away on the question? I'd love to hear a little bit about you.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you all very much for fitting us into the tight schedule for this meeting. So taking some time out today and speaking with myself as a candidate, much appreciated. But if you want to know about me, I'm not that exciting. I'm 34 now. Married with one kid at home. She's going to bed without, seeing me on FaceTime tonight. So that kind of stinks, but that's kind of why I do what I do. But I'm not a very exciting person. I wake up, bring my daughter to daycare at some point in the late morning or afternoon, and I get ready for work, and then I come home, go to bed, do it all over on the days off. Occasionally I work, but it's usually just time spent with family, maybe some whatever's good on HBO that night or Netflix that night, but really not that exciting. I'm doing full-time police officer in Halston for 3.5 years. I went to the academy in January 2018 at Randolph. I was part of there was a new pilot program they did in the state. They revamped the entire program, so they kind of tested us out on it. So it was a little bumpy throughout the 20-some-odd weeks that we were there, but we made it and passed. I started my connection to Halston. I started as an auxiliary police officer back in 2011. Craig Denman was the director at the time. He brought me on, and I did 6-7 years doing that, just to kind of experience law enforcement a little bit. I wasn't sure really where I wanted to go when I graduated college. So that was just kind of to maybe satiate the desire for law enforcement a little bit, and then I got more and more into it, and then the opportunity came in 2018 or 2017, and here I am today.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and start with questions, and start with John, of course.
Good morning, officer. Good evening. How are you, sir?
Good, sir. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. The role of a sergeant, what does that mean to you with respect to this promotion for work on your way?
So on the surface, it's the shift supervisor, but I don't believe it's just that position being just somebody who sits in an office and maybe commands from the office or something like that. You got to get out there. You got to be with the people. I think they set a tone for the shift. I think your shift can be successful as a group, but I think it can be a negative or a failure of a shift, maybe set by the tone of one person. So you kind of want that person to be, I don't know, families to work, but you want a good, solid group. You all have to trust each other and know each other and know what to expect from each other. Sergeant's not just somebody who's in charge of a shift. There's divisions within the department that they oversee, the dispatch or maybe some investigations. Like the K-9 program is overseen by Sergeant Hagan. If you look at the flow chart, you'd be surprised there's like dozens of divisions within the department, and those are usually headed up by a sergeant.
With with regard to the position, do you envision yourself taking on more of a leadership role?
Of course, like I kind of started off, I don't think I should sit in an office and kind of let things go.
No, you did say that, but what does that mean? How do you translate that to
I don't think a
act?
sergeant, sure, I don't think a sergeant should sit in an office and run the ship.
So what will you do?
Be out there. You tell them you want them to do something, you set the example.
What if they don't do it?
That's a conversation that needs to be had.
Tell me what you understand about the new Police Reform Act in Massachusetts.
I've had a lot of conversations with people who have a better grasp on it than I do. I don't like the timing of it necessarily, but it is what it is. But going to that post system, that's what most of the country does. So I think it was just kind of a matter of time. And obviously, there was an event.
Why didn't you like the timing?
Just because it was something that happened in Minnesota. That's 21-hour car drive from here. That kind of set it in motion. And I feel like we were kind of being legislated based on a really horrible act that happened in Minnesota.
What impact will the Police Reform Act and changes from it have on Holliston PD?
If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing ethically and morally and legally, I really don't think it's going to have that much of an impact. Training might be a little different. We're an accredited agency anyways. We're very strict on policies, and we're a really put together agency. Like I said, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing ethically, morally, and legally, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on how we do things in Holliston.
Awesome, thank you.
Ben?
Sure. So, pleasure to meet you.
Sir?
So I have a couple questions. So the first one I want to ask you about is community. So how do you approach reaching out to the community, and how do you think the officers who be working with you should do so?
Community interactions are a big portion of what we do. When I started, I was on midnight, so there wasn't a ton of community interactions, unless maybe I was lucky enough to work an evening shift or a day shift. But working at night is a little harder in your community interactions, where maybe someone just going out for a late night smoke and just chatting up with somebody in the square walking around. But being on an evening shift, I do my best to get out there a little bit more. The spots in town where kids are riding bikes. Just stop and say hi. Not everyone wants to talk to you, but if you stop and chat with them and show them that you're a human, generally people will chat with you. I'm currently trying to get off the ground an initiative within the department called Community Resource Dog. In the funding stages right now. It's we had a little kind of a pseudo event for a couple weeks ago with the coffee with a cop. I raised a little bit of cash. So really, it's just once the funding gets off the ground, that program can hopefully get off the ground, and that is a very community-oriented program. You can bring it to calls that are deemed safe, where maybe someone's going through a crisis, or you can just bring it to a community event or just some kids on the street, and that's an event in and of itself. I've spoken to handlers all across the state, zero negative feedback on the program, and multiple times they're told you can leave the dog and you can hit the road.
Now, my second question is about mental health.
Sure.
And how do you approach the stresses of the job, and how would you help the officers working with you to handle their mental health, particularly if there's stressful events going on in the community?
If there's a stressful event or a stressful call that you're on, I've learned from one of the sergeants that I work for, if there was ever an unattended death or maybe a kind of a hot call, they'll check in with you, making sure you're okay. You can't pull anything out of you if you're holding something in. They can only do their best to stop and have that conversation. There's resources through the town, and there's resources through MassCop that we can reach out to, so no one has to know about it. But if you see something, sometimes it's kind of easy to see when people are hiding things and pulling them in, and maybe they're just a little off one day. But you can see that and have that conversation and be that ear, or just kind of be that direction. We have a clinician that we work with, and I'm sure she'd be happy to give some resources to an officer who may be going through something at home, or just some call they just came from that was a little bothersome.
Okay. Thank you. I'm all set.
Okay, I have two questions.
Sure.
So you were in the academy in 2017?
I started January 2018.
2018, okay. And then you took the sergeant exam in 2019?
I believe there were 2 that year.
Okay. So that's a pretty fast track. What motivated you to go from academy and then within 12 to 18 months sit for the sergeant exam?
A lot of encouragement from the chief. Well, he was he really wanted people to do that. He's not a quiet guy. He's back. He wants his department to be involved. But in any job that I've ever been in, I've never been somebody who just wants to apply for a job, hired, put my feet up. I'm always looking for the next step, more training, more responsibility. When I was interviewed and hired as a patrolman, that's one of the things that I said. that's where the sites eventually go. The next step is being a sergeant. I'm a trained, field training officer. I feel like that's kind of a natural progression kind of into that sergeant role. You're in a car with somebody for 8 hours a day, saying, this is where we can go, this is what we're going to do, how are we going to do this. I feel like that kind of naturally progresses into the sergeant's role. So I always felt like I wanted to be in those leadership positions and found myself in those positions.
Okay. So you've answered the what if, but if you're the sergeant, what if you are not selected for sergeant? I mean, you sound very motivated. You have a accelerated timeline, which is impressive, and it's impressive that you passed the sergeant exam, within just a short time of graduating from the academy. If you were not to be promoted to sergeant, what would be next for you?
It is what it is. I don't make the decision way above my pay grade. If I don't get selected, I don't get selected. It's not gonna keep me down.
What are you motivated to do next?
There's always going to be another opportunity. There's more to do with the department. There's more retirements coming. There's more specialties that will open up. There's something that you can do to get involved. I've kind of immersed myself in that resource dog program, which is making a whole lot of my time. But when things open up, I usually throw my name in the hat. There's some things I haven't quite been interested in. I do the social media for the department. I put my name in for that. They put out, they wanted to do sexual assault investigators. I was selected for that. Went through that week-long training. Have multiple interviews under my belt. So if you're not a sergeant, that doesn't mean that you're not involved, that you don't care. There's other things that you can do.
What kind of dog will it be?
That's the golden question. And usually it's used a more docile breed like a lab or a golden retriever, but I'm open. And of course, should the program get off the ground, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be selected as the handler, but that's the hope.
So not a Chihuahua.
Hopefully not. Those can be a little mean.
Okay. Any follow-up questions or last
I'm good.
I'm all set, thank you.
I think we're all set for now, so we will take the next candidate, and then the board will deliberate.
So, well, select board, Mr. Administrator, thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yes, please, thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Nowhere else you'd rather be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So you are here for the position of sergeant,
Yes, I am.
and you've been through the interviews. Obviously, you took the exam in 2019 and passed.
Yes, ma'am.
You had your interviews with members of your department
And,
tonight.
yes.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have the clerk, John Cronin, ask his questions, and then we'll have the vice chair, Ben Sparrow, ask his, and then I'll follow up this line, and then if there are any final questions, we'll come back to those.
Thank you.
Did you want to give him a chance for opening remarks?
Yeah.
Any
So-
open remarks?
We'll take a look at your resume here, and you can give us some background as well. We'd love to hear a little bit about you.
Great. My name's Andrew McRae. I've worked for the Holliston Police Department for 19 years. I've done a variety of jobs at the Holliston Police Department, along with anything else that's asked of me. And now that we have the open position, I think it's my time to step up and be able to lead some newer officers. The inundation of new officers that we've got coming into the department over the last few years.
20 years, you said, in Holliston?
19.
19 years in Holliston. Want to share a little bit about your time in Holliston, your experiences, your thoughts of the community, the police department?
Well, it started, growing up in Holliston, so it's obviously a place that I love. I've enjoyed it. I grew up here, moved out when I got married, so I could afford a house back in the day. But I've run the gamut of everything from working overnights to being a training officer for the last probably dozen years. And I've done pretty much whatever's been asked of me. I've tried to be a team player all along.
In addition to working in Holliston, your resume reveals you actually were a police officer in Sherman as well.
Correct.
Point that out, that was for, 11 years, is that about right?
11 years, correct. Dispatching and police officer.
This opportunity is a promotional opportunity to the rank of sergeant that comes, with the burden of supervision, leadership. Tell us a little bit about how that change is going to manifest itself in the way you conduct your business to get this job.
Obviously, it'll be a lot more responsibility on my part. I believe at this point in my life, I've got the time available. I don't have a lot of the extra burdens that may be drawn upon me, so I can dedicate a lot of my time to this position and to the department.
As a sergeant, you may be in a different role than a patrol officer, where you have tiers. Sergeant, you may have to encounter issues where some corrective action is needed. Tell us about your leadership style and how you're going to conduct that.
The leadership style is going to be a direct contact with the subordinates that I have underneath me. Constructive meetings on a regular basis. Try to hopefully get around any problems before they actually become a problem.
What if you don't?
Then you have to go about it the way any supervisor, I hope, would go about it. You need to start at the bottom and work your way up. You need, obviously, there's a ladder of progression with discipline.
Tell us a little bit about your understanding of the Police Reform Act.
Police Reform Act, it's going to be a lot of changes. There's still a lot of unknown there. That unknown, I believe, starts July 1st. Those reforms are going to start coming into play. And along with the change, I don't believe there's going to be change. And then, at least in our little corner of the world, I don't believe there's going to be a lot of changes. Because I believe we've been embracing a lot of what's going to be in that bill all along, with our training, with our discipline, with our reporting of things that go on. So I think we're going to have a lot, I can't say all by any stretch, but we're going to have a lot of it covered. And once it does get implemented, obviously it's going to come down the line from the administration to.
So you think we'll have a lot of it covered. Do you think we'll have any challenges?
I believe that there's always going to be a challenge.
Where do you think they might come from?
I believe, again, the unknown. I think from the other officers who don't have direct knowledge of the bill itself. So right now there's rumors going around. Hey, what's going to happen here? What's going to be going on?
Have you read the bill?
I have not.
Have you received additional training as a result of the Reform Act?
Not yet, no.
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you think police officers can engage with the community and how you can encourage officers that are working with you to engage with the average citizen who maybe doesn't have a lot of interactions. I think I've been lucky over the years. I started in Sherburne. I started in a small town where you have to get out. You have to get to know the people. I'm a big proponent, and the chief is also, we call them community interactions, to get out of the car and go talk with people. Even if it's a kid riding a bike, pull over, talk to them. A lot of people, especially nowadays, have a lot of misconceptions about us. And I think, especially being in a small town, which is great, you can eliminate those conceptions about just our profession in general. But how you were saying, things we're doing Coffee with a Cop. We just did it a few weeks ago. The holiday stroll is easy as, getting out. Just it's a huge benefit there. Just you can talk to hundreds of people in the course of one evening. Just getting out. You got to talk to people. You can't be just encapsulated in your protective little bubble of your cruiser and expect people to be open. And shifting a little bit, what about with respect to mental health for officers? What would you do to ensure that you're addressing and aware of the mental health of the officers?
It's a huge issue we're dealing with nowadays, not just with with officers, but with the general public. You know it, we're dealing with it all the time. I think it's helpful that you get to work with the same group of people almost all the time, so you get to know them personally, and you get to know their quirks and how they're if they're off tonight, or and then as you supervise, you talk to the person on the hey, how's it going? Find out what's going on. It may be something stupid. A guy might have forgot to water the lawn. Who knows what's going on? But it's that personal interaction where a small department is, you're able to interact with everybody.
Thank you.
I have two questions for you, Officer. The first is, so your resume says that you had been involved twice with new hires.
I've been on the committee for the new hiring of the last two officers.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the strengths of the new hires and the direction that they're having on the department, if any. Are they having an impact on the department? Are they having an impact on the direction the department is heading in?
I believe so. I work with one directly, Alex Yu, and Chris Avey. He's our detective in the evening now, so I work with those two directly. Ryan Parent, I don't work with directly. Even though we're a small department, he's on the night shift, so we see each other in passing. It's good to have new blood come into the department. Gets things going again. But it gets things moving. They're excited to be out there, excited to be doing things, and that's where supervision comes into play. You got to give them guidance. You got to steer them. Sometimes they could be a little too exuberant. So you got to kind of keep the reins in on them. But it's been good being able to go through the stack of resumes with everybody else and then sit through the questioning. And it's been enlightening.
It's been a great group of hires too. You applied for this position back in 2019.
Correct.
What have you done since then to develop further into where you are today, applying for it a second time?
I think I've tried to pay closer attention to the 5 sergeants we have now, and each of them have their own leadership style. And I try to pick out maybe a little thing of what I like with each one, because you're not going to get one that does everything great. So I try to pick out a little something that I may take along the line, and how I may eventually, if I get the position, lead my people.
Any follow-up questions from either of you?
No.
Good. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you.
So I believe our duty was to interview the 2 officers, and now to deliberate on whether or not we're prepared, if there's some consensus on taking a vote for the promotion. John?
I'm ready to vote. I think there's a clear winner here.
Okay. So should we talk about each one, or do you want to just put your first choice forward and go for it? So,
I'm happy to give a review for each justification. I think Officer Charette has, from the record that's sent to us by HPD, an excellent record of service. He clearly has a commitment to the job and a focus on creativity. I like his answer to Ben's question. But when I compared him to Officer McGray, the experience level just seems to jump out to me. And he's got many more years of law enforcement experience. He touches on a variety of different areas in his resume that somebody with his experience you would expect to have. And I think that's the kind of background that I support for a sergeant, somebody who's got the breadth of skills, training, and experience in all these varieties that can help impart that to subordinates, new hires, and so forth. liked Officer McRae's perspective on the Police Reform Act. I think he understands the importance of that kind of reform in Massachusetts and its place in our police department as well, so, he would be my first choice.
Okay. Ben?
I agree. I think, Officer McRae his experience really stands out. And I think Officer Charette, has, a lot of enthusiasm, and I like the things that he's, putting forward, but I think he needs a little more time, I think, in his current position before I think he'd be ready. But I definitely believe he's, I think we'll probably see him again, this board would see him playing, in a few years, in another position. So I would, support, Officer McRae.
Okay, well, I couldn't agree with you guys more. I thought that both officers obviously are a great asset to our police department, and I really like Officer Charette's motivation, and I agree with you, Ben. I think he will be before us again in the near future. He seems incredibly motivated, and I know the emphasis that Chief Stone places on community policing, so I like what he has to say about putting his name forward for the social media management, because I think that's a great way to share the good work of the police department with the town, so I like that. I agree with you both that Officer McRae has the greater experience, and I won't go on that. I particularly liked what he had to say, or what's on his resume rather, in terms of being part of the hiring process for the new hires. I just think that we know that there are more hires to come, and he's got the experience, who's out there, the type of candidates. He's done a great job in being a part of that process to bring in some great new officers, so I particularly took notice of that. So if the board is ready, I'll entertain a motion for or a promotion of one of the two officers for sergeant.
So I'll make a motion to appoint Officer Andrew McRae to the position of sergeant, with the official appointment date to be determined by the police chief.
So I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. And I think we have Chief Stone on the call, so Chief, you don't have to respond, but I'll just say, please express our thanks to both of the officers for coming in tonight to be interviewed. I thought they both did a great job. So moving on the agenda to next, we will have the coronavirus community update. Chief Cassidy?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So,
Well, that's what you look like when I do that.
I had to remember to shave before I came in.
You are no longer the masked man.
Not anymore, no. So, since last week, we've had 3 additional cases, bringing us up to 810. No new recoveries, but as I indicated last week, several of our, quote, active cases are a little bit aged. They date back to May 1st and May 10th. No new fatalities have been reported to us. We have 2 new addresses at which active cases are located. We do have 1 cluster at a single-family home, and also now have 1 single case at a multi-family dwelling. So as you look at the graph, it's continuing to plateau the way we want it to. When you look at our positivity rate, definitely down in the low ranges where we want to see it. Again, it's the second week where we are in the gray, and compared to the communities around us on the map, we are in good company. Most of the contiguous communities are in the gray, with the exception of Framingham, which is not contiguous, but Milford are both in the green. Looking at our vaccination statistics, as of the report from last Thursday, which is shot in arms as of last Tuesday, more than 3/4 of our community is at least partially vaccinated. I think that's a great milestone for us to achieve. And also, more than 6 in 10 are considered to be fully vaccinated. And when you look at the statistic of the 34% of the individuals 0 to 19, the breakdown for those who are partially vaccinated include 57% of the 12 to 15-year-olds and 101% of the 16 to 19-year-olds. So as soon as those shots were eligible for a lot of those school-age children, based on the emergency use authorization, their parents got them to appointments and were getting shots in arms. So it's a good trend that we like to see continue. And with that, I will pause and see if there are any questions.
John, any questions?
Chief, the community and I think the Commonwealth in general feel very comfortable as we reopen that we've achieved, as you point out, high rates of vaccination. Nevertheless, this virus has had a tremendous impact on our lives over the last year and a half almost. One of the things I'm concerned about is looking forward. What can you tell us about EPH or the CDC's view of the next several months with respect to breakthroughs and variants?
So there are several variants of concern that DPH continues to monitor through surveillance. That is done through a random sampling of positive tests that come into the labs, and then they do case investigation to determine if there are patterns when they find certain variants of concern are becoming more prevalent. They will continue to do contact tracing currently through September, they have indicated. They have the contract in place with the Community Tracing Collaborative. In terms of what it's going to look like this summer and the fall, as we saw last summer, cases tend to go down. That will probably continue with the number of individuals that we have vaccinated. So the additional cases that we will be seeing this summer will likely be in a couple categories. First of all, people who did not get vaccinated, breakthroughs, and possibly children who were not eligible to get vaccinated yet. So I guess that's sort of a subset of the first category. My concern is the variants of concern. They continue to have some double mutations, as we're seeing in India. I know there was a new strain that was identified in Thailand. I'm concerned about the fall. I'll be honest. And
Not heard the same.
As excited as we were on Saturday last week to lose the mask, as I said last week, don't burn them, keep them. You might need them again, not only for healthcare and transportation and K-12 and other settings, but depending on what happens, as we're seeing in other countries, there may be mask mandates that come back in. So,
okay. My second question, and if you're going to bring this up under number 4, the CARES Act, defer, is can you explain to us the impact of the governor's executive order extension into September on a variety of different things that many of us have been doing under the pandemic? That's what you want to bring up now or later?
Sure, I can cover that now. So the expectation is that he has indicated that the gubernatorial state of emergency will expire on June 15th. What's going to happen on June 15th is the Department of Public Health is going to put out several public health advisories, which are going to cover some of the same mitigation measures that we've been doing for more than a year under the previous executive order and emergency declaration that he had stated. So we're still going to see certain sector-specific guidance. Again, K-12 exists through the end of the school year. They are still working out what the guidance will look like at the elementary level for the fall. But a lot of the other sectors, unless, again, there's a resurgence and there's a data-driven reason, most of what we've been doing for the last over a year will expire on June 15th. And the governor's filed legislation to extend some of the provisions, which would allow things like the remote participation for public meetings, but that needs to be solved by the legislature before. And again, that would only be a temporary fix through September.
Yeah, that move was intended to do that, to give them the space to develop some kind of because they're dealing with the state budget right now. So that's something I think we need to keep in very close contact on, because it does have an impact on the way we're conducting business. And for everyone I've spoken to, they want to keep remote meeting as an option going forward. That has a certain benefit to the way we conduct our business. I think it's beneficial. There's a consequence and a price to it.
And there is a price, and so that's why the technology director last week was trying out some new equipment. Mm-hmm. And depending on what is decided by the legislature and what it looks like, past September, we'll determine whether or not we're going to make a request for some additional CARES Act accelerated telework capacity funding for meeting rooms, especially in this building and possibly even at other municipal buildings throughout town. Sure.
Okay, Ben?
Just one question. Have you heard anything about vaccines for under 12-year-olds? Has there been any dialogue and anything?
There have been clinical trials for younger children, and the earliest that I've heard that those might be available would be the fall. So
December 1st?
Well, right after school has already started, unfortunately.
Around that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all I have.
Continuing to monitor.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so as I think about planning and as we shift out of the restrictions and out of the state of emergency, we are certainly going to hear a lot about the breakthrough cases. I hear about those at work already as a concern, and we will hear a lot about whether or not boosters are going to be needed and so on, and we will hear about mutations. So I have a couple questions for you. If you're not prepared to answer them tonight, that's absolutely fine. I'm just sort of looking down the road what we might want to expect. As the state of emergency ends on June 15th, most likely, Holliston will look at our own local state of emergency and make some decisions. If we go to the fall, a hypothetical in the fall, how do you see informing the board after the state of emergencies expire or done with? How do you envision that going? A monthly coronavirus update? Do you want to continue weekly? You don't have to answer tonight. These are kind of questions. Do you see them tied to the state of emergency being in place or not in place? And then also knowing what is likely coming to us in the fall in terms of some of the things that we're thinking about and talking about, how do you best see this board hearing that information and working with that information?
I think it really is a two-pronged communication strategy. My expectation would be that I probably would ramp up my weekly email correspondence to you. Right now, I'm giving you sort of a Thursday summary after the APH gives their community risk designation and sort of the 10,000-foot overview. But I expect that for most things, I would be able to continue to brief you electronically on just the regular ongoing what's taking place. With some frequency, however, I will need to be coming in, and whether it's tied to CARES Act, whether it's tied to ARPA, you know, I expect that within probably at least once a month, you would be hearing from me on one or more of those programs. And also, that's a way for us to continue to get the information out to the public. We do publish the weekly summary report on the website on Thursday nights after the DPH issues their designation. Not a lot of hits through to that link on the website, but it's out there. People can review it. So yes, I'll continue to brief the board, but as we get back into the new normal, I expect that I would be welcome at some Monday night training meetings for the fire department and the ambulance corps, and would be able to just cycle in here on an agreed upon schedule that both meets your expectations as well as the data that I need to convey to you publicly.
Okay. I'm all set. Any other questions before we move on? Good. All right, so we're going to move on to the CARES Act, ARPA programmatic update. I do, actually, thank you, yes, I learned to look to my right here. Do we have any calls from Zoom for the chief on the coronavirus community update? I see a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Nothing?
Those are the same questions we saw last week.
Right, okay. So we're ready to move on to the CARES Act, ARPA programmatic update.
Excellent. So in terms of CARE, we only had 2 additional expenses posted to Munis this past week. Those were under hiring and training. So not much change to the bottom line, not much change to the graphic. More importantly, as we continue to look forward to the American Rescue Plan Act, we have alluded last week to the fact that the town administrator was putting together the framework for the steering group. So I do have a slide that would show conceptually what he has floated out there in terms of what this would look like. This would be a representative of your board now that you've reorganized, a representative of the school committee once they reorganize, a representative of the of the finance committee after they reorganize tonight, And then, so those would be elected officials, and then the following three would all be employees. That would be the school superintendent or designee, myself, and then the town administrator or designee. And as it was envisioned through the town administrator's framework was that the staff, the second set of three, would be able to reach down into their areas of influence and be able to bring creative ideas back up to this group that would then make recommendations to the board, because
So that's solicit and receive, the two-way street.
yes, and, you know, the expectation would be if somebody heard about something that another community was doing, reach out to that board or committee or department in our community to say, hey, we've heard so-and-so is doing this, is that something that we might consider here? What are the advantages or disadvantages of that type of a program? And be able to let them research it and then bubble it back up through the steering group, which ultimately would be the one making the recommendation to the board for the approval of expenditures. So again, we're still in the early development phases here because again, 3 boards are reorganizing this week.
Right, right.
The other 3 are in place. Can start to attend meetings as necessary.
Well, Travis, just a quick thought there. Are you looking then for the board tonight to appoint somebody to the steering group now that we've reorganized and this is about to get, I know we're in no huge rush, tremendous sense of urgency to get the steering group meeting because we're still waiting on that trickle of information to come in. But are you looking for the board tonight to make a decision on the select board representative?
That would be excellent. I think we're going to have at least one other opportunity to discuss another group that will default to the chair unless the group sort of wants to have somebody else as the point person. This is one where if the group is ready to sort of have a conversation of who wants to be the point person for the select board to the steering group, we can certainly do that tonight. I will be having to reach out to the school committee and the finance committee after I'm aware of their reorg. So it could wait until next Tuesday if we'd like, but if there's a clear direction tonight. And then the other thing that I would just say to that point is just as those 3 groups that are seated on the steering group will be regrouping, a number of all of the other boards and committees that this group will be looking for ideas from, right, from, elected boards and to appointed committees that may have ideas that will be suitable for ARPA guidance, that all of those ideas will be reached out to through this ARPA steering group to solicit those ideas, and then as the chief sort of referenced a couple examples where we'll be working with staff and sort of pinpointing certain things that, the sooner this group is ready to go and then can reach out to all of the boards and committees and towns, the better. Right. But also, as we will have to work with these other groups, next week would be fine, but if you're ready to have the conversation now, that's certainly...
You don't see that, so you did present to each of the 3 of us the structure for the steering group. We're hearing Chief Cassidy present it tonight. I don't envision changes to the structure that you have in place.
I have sent this to the school committee and finance committee chairs so that they're prepped on it, but also with the understanding that they were about to reorganize at the time, and that I would be revisiting that as soon as this board had.
Okay. I mean, it was a 3-day weekend. I don't know where you were, where you're playing. I mean, we got the information from you a while ago, a little over a week maybe. They've had some time to sit on it, but I also recognize it was a busy weekend where you may not have been tied to your email. So how do either of you feel about making a decision tonight about the select board representative? Would you rather wait a week, or are you prepared to talk about it tonight?
I don't think it's a heavy lift. I think that, we're ready to move on tonight, plug the hole, and we can keep going on
I
it.
agree. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay. Do either of you have a strong interest?
I have an interest. I think it's a very cool steering group with continuation, if you will, since the CARES Act stuff is last year, but
No, I'm good if John wants to.
Okay. I thought that you have done a great job with the CARES Act as chair over the past year, and I'd love to see you take on the position.
there you go.
All right. So would you like a motion, or?
That'd be great.
Okay, so I'll ask you a motion to designate our select board representative.
I make a motion to nominate John Cronin as the select board representative to the ARPA steering group.
And I will second that. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's see.
Okay.
And on a future agenda, I would expect that we probably would be putting in front of the board the application for the first tranche of funding. DLS did put out some guidance today, including the forms that would be required, which include signatory pages. So that would be in the future a motion to authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the board.
And by today, he means about an hour before this meeting, we got some guys from DLS.
Does that mean the cash will flow in the same way CARES did, and that they'll give us the funding without the eligible reimbursements that go against it? In other words, we don't need shovel-ready projects approved and voted upon to get the money. They'll give us
as I understand,
50% of our eligibility. Now it goes in the bank, and we start using that as ours.
Right, I think I think the discussion that we had last week a little bit was to the point of, it looks a lot like CARES from the way that it is under the statute. So Chapter 44, Section 53A dictates how the money will come to the town and dictates the role of the select board in that. The thinking of the ARPA steering group is that there is a lot more potential, creativity is probably going to be a word that will be thrown back at me in the future, but there are other options that we have with ARPA that we did not have with CARES. And that, a steering group really is the right way to go about making sure that all of those ideas from all boards and committees and all groups in Holliston have a place to funnel those and to weigh them. And so I think I'll stop there before I use another word like creative.
You use it well.
And again, CARES is concurrent with issues of eligibility for reimbursement for FEMA for some eligible expenses under CARES. We're really not looking at that for this amount of money that is going to be coming to the town. And again, just as there was ESSER off to the side in parallel, rounds 1 and 2 for the schools that ran concurrent with CARES, there's an ESSER 3 that's coming. It's independent of this, but we've already acknowledged that there are behavioral health and community needs that the school and other departments like Youth and Family Services, the police, the fire department, already, as Council on Aging, have a role in addressing needs in the community, but that we can, and I'm going to have to use my thesaurus to find a word other than creative.
Innovative?
Innovative is great. That's the new creative. Solutions to some of those identified areas where it would be a good investment, because as we've said, the intent of ARPA is to allow the community to recover from the impact of the pandemic and have a solid foundation moving forward in recovery.
Okay. Anything else on the update?
That's it. Just that at some point in a future agenda, you will likely have the form in your packet, and that you will likely be asked to authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the board for the application to state.
We don't have a timeline on that. I know we don't.
They didn't give us a deadline for when that means, but as a non-entitlement unit, because we're not one of those big metropolitan communities that got the money directly from U.S. Treasury, because it's coming through our state fiduciary agency. We're an NEU, and so they just issued the application today, but they didn't say what it had to be in there.
2 years in, I thought I knew all the abbreviations. All right, so if John or Ben don't have any other comments or questions, I'll turn to the Zoom call for anyone who has a question for the chief on the CARES Act ARPA programmatic update. Okay, so thank you, Chief.
Absolutely.
And we will move on to number 5 warrants. So, gentlemen, you'll have to work this out. I'm not sure how this is going to play out here.
I didn't do it ahead of time.
We were
Can't see. Can't assume. All right, I'd like to present the warrant totaling $507,953.71.
Any second?
Second motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Okay, thanks, John. We're going to move.
Maybe for FY22, we can upgrade the folder too, eh?
New folder next year.
Yeah, put a number up or something. It's
Not in the budget.
yeah.
say about that, so there's... All right, so we're gonna move on to public comment. John, do you have any public comment?
I do. Thank you. Just wanted to thank the community for its participation and turnout for yesterday's Memorial Day celebration. It was both solemn and refreshing. The community, for the first time since COVID began, came out maskless for the most part and enjoyed a relatively rain-free day. I would like to recognize Ms. Hine for a very moving and kind speech delivered to veterans and folks assembled at the conclusion of our march. I want to recognize the veterans who marched and were recognized. That's always quite moving and humbling to be in the presence of those kind of folks, including our Grand Marshal, Charlie Nickerson, who, again, incredible life arc and storied and heroic service to our country. And finally, the one thing I did want to call out, Tina and Ben, is the work done by Steve Bradford. Year in and year out, Steve does incredible job organizing these events with veterans, and he does so in such a professional and sound way. He's a great asset to the community. I want to thank Steve for putting together a great event, again, on behalf of all of us. So those are my public comments.
I would have marched left if he hadn't said go right. I would have stopped if he hadn't said start, and I definitely would have gotten in front of the car if he hadn't been there to direct us. He did a fantastic job. Ben, any public comments?
Yeah, it's been a wild week, but I just wanted to also thank everyone for coming out to vote last week and participating. Democracy is important, and it requires citizen participation, and so I wanted to say thank you to the voters. I also wanted to say thanks to the town clerk for once again organizing an efficient and streamlined process, even under conditions with still some COVID rules and things like that, and all the volunteers that came out to help make to make things work. So I wanted to say thank you.
Okay, and on a different note, I wanted to thank the town hall staff for getting the two pride flags up on town hall today. The picture that was sent this morning by our town administrator, it was early. You could see the sun shining right out of the eastern sky, so you knew it was up there before the start of day for June 1st, and I thought that was great. So happy Pride Month, the entire month of June, and the flags will be up for the entire month of June. And again, big thank you to the staff who made that possible. And that's all I have. So I'll turn to the Zoom call. If anyone has any public comments, please raise your hand. We'd be happy to hear from you. Okay, I think we're all set. So we are going to move on then to the next item, which is the update or comment from the town administrator. Travis?
Okay. So a few things here. I was asked for an update from a few interested people in the Woodland area on the heavy commercial vehicle exclusion. So just by way of update, I think we'll probably be doing this on a weekly basis until we're up and running here. But the traffic rules and orders have been updated. Conversation between the DPW director and the police chief on where the signs will be and the signs that are the most appropriate for the discussion that we've had previously has been had. And when I have a date at which those signs will come in, I think we can probably schedule the final, when we'll be at the last stages. An education component of how the traffic enforcement officer and some others included in HPD will go about making sure everybody's aware of this. Goes along the lines of what we discussed previously, but I will provide to you sort of where they're thinking. It's all along Woodland, as we've discussed, in a variety of places. And then outreach to businesses so that they're prepared. And then the electronic signs, obviously, in addition to the signs that we're putting up to make clear that will be there permanently, also the electronic signs that we discussed in the December time frame will be utilized, and that's all part of the rollout as well. So again, once I have a final, date that the signs will be in and put up, we'll be sort of into that beginning education phase that the chief had highlighted for you. And then, a timeline of when we want to go from the education phase into sort of an enforcement phase. So, obviously, we'll just continue to update as those things progress.
Travis, any word on the other exclusion applications that were put forward to MassDOT?
Not a word. Based on the timeline of when we put in Woodland in November of 2020, I would say that there's certainly, I can prod them a little bit, but, we have a ways to go before we're gonna get some feedback.
Could I ask you to prod them?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And thanks for the update. I mean, I think the community interest is so high, so, providing updates on a fairly regular basis, I think is genuinely appreciated by people.
Absolutely. Another thing that came up at the previous meeting was a request, for an update on the Marshall Street Solar Project. We did have, a couple developments, so I reached out to Beth, to get her on the calendar, and June 14th, I think, is sort of an all-inclusive update from Beth. We'll bring her in, probably have, another update on timeline. I'll talk to her if it makes sense to have Rennie from Soul Systems with her, but, obviously Beth has a pulse on all of these things. Give an update on where we are, projection on FY22 revenue, but also, the whole picture and those types of things. So that will be June 14th. A couple other, these are all over the place, I'm just setting the order here. We reorganized the board, obviously, tonight, with Ms. Hine as the chair, but the other things that we'll be discussing at the upcoming June meetings is gonna be liaisons. So obviously, I can recirculate that list if anybody's gonna want anything. And then we'll also be doing, a number of appointments, in June is the time for appointments, so that will be coming up, and we can discuss, the agenda that those will be on. But June will be the time frame for liaisons and appointments, potentially as early as June 14th as well, although I will have to follow up a couple loose ends. Two things that are ongoing, I know people are waiting for, so I just want to update the Blair Square RFP from the annual town meeting. I do have one hiccup with council that they're working through before that gets posted to the state website, our website, and goes out to a number of vendors. Trying to move that as quickly as possible. The same thing with the DPW feasibility study for a facility. Just a couple of questions with council on the best way to get that out from a procurement standpoint. But obviously, I mean, we're talking a week delay more than anything, but we're excited to get those out and on the street. Two very important projects for the community. One last thing, because the last one I'll have a little feedback on. The Assistant Town Administrator, HR Director position has now been posted. Applications are being received through June 18th at noon. A hiring committee has been assembled, and that committee will be the Superintendent of Schools, the Police Chief, the Town Planner, the Director of Parks and Recreation, and now I'm going to forget somebody, the IT Director, and there is a sixth member that I'm going to need to remember and apologize to for forgetting. But I'm very excited about that. We've already received quite a bit of interest, hearing from a number of groups, and it's gotten sent out to a lot. I think we're going to get an excellent response to that position. So right now that is open until June 18th.
Is it your intention that this board will have the opportunity to interview and make our recommendations for that hire?
So the second round of interviews would be myself and the chair, and potentially a third party. It was not going to be an on-camera interview was the way that we looked at this.
That's regretful. I think I would have liked to have seen it as a board interview. Is there anybody reconsider that?
Sure. Let me reconsider, and we'll get back to you on that. At this point, the steering committee hopefully will look at the week after the 18th, just because of the timeline. We're hoping to get somebody in, ideally in the beginning of August, would be the most.
Is the hiring group, committee, are they going to do the interviews, or are they just going to screen the resumes in advance?
They're going to interview probably at most 5 candidates and be part of the review of resume process.
And are you looking at interviews still June 21st to June 24th? That was sort of the time frame.
For that steering group, yes.
Oh, all right, but not the final.
Nope. Okay. And then they would pass on, ideally 2 to 3, but again, I mean, it's going to be about the response that we get. So, again, very, very excited for that process. And then the last thing that I'll mention, and this sort of goes along the same lines of the ARPA discussion that we had previously, is that the Comprehensive Long-Range Planning Committee is sort of ready to go, but is very reliant on groups to be reorganizing right now. So the way that it will be is that 14 of the 17 seats essentially default to the chair of a group unless the group wants to designate somebody else. So Right now, I'm waiting to hear on the chairs of these groups. At the same point, this group now has a chair, so the question would be, and I can put this on next week's agenda if we prefer, but the question will be, does the chair of the select board want to have the seat for the Comprehensive Long-Range Planning Committee, one of 17 seats, or would the board want to designate somebody else for the seat?
So, on that, I'm going to come back to Ben. You had as one of your goals for your first year on the board to develop a master plan. Does this fit in line with what you were hoping in terms of?
Not a master plan, but
No, I understand it's not a master plan, but does it fit in line with?
It actually, it does. I would love to, but I defer to you if you want to continue to, as the chair, I would let you.
I think
I'd love to.
Go around.
In addition to that, I think it makes perfect sense, because you're a liaison for the capital plan too, right?
Yeah.
So, is it next?
Yeah, so you would like to vote on this?
Ideally.
Okay,
I'll
so,
make a motion.
yes,
To appoint Mr. Sparrow as the select board designee to the long-term strategic working group, planning group, what was there? I can't remember all that.
well, hold, if you can't say it, then you can't have it.
Yeah.
Long-range comprehensive planning committee.
Comprehensive Long-Range Planning Committee.
Yeah.
I will second that motion. All in favor?
Thank you. Corpica. The easier way.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Corpica.
I thought it was the clerk, but okay.
Yeah. Cool. That group is on the website. The way that we have it right now is to say that there's nobody currently designated. We have the 17 seats that are chairs until I get another designee, so we'll update that with the select board, and I'll update that as I get groups. Ideally, what will be happening is that, and this is my discussions with Mary Greendale, is, if we can get the groups situated as quickly as possible, which may take a couple of weeks with the groups meeting to sort of have meetings over the summer, that we would get the group together, have some initial discussions, but really starting in earnest in the Labor Day timeframe because of the size of the group to get those people together, to begin to sort of move mountains here. It's probably the most realistic. We'll move as quickly as we can, but that was what Mayor and I discussed as a reasonable timeline. So more to come on that, but thank you for that, and I'm all set.
Here,
Okay.
Jay, what's your sixth first?
Mary Buskey is my sixth person. Thank you.
Any other questions for the town administrator? All right, anybody on the call with questions for the town administrator? Okay, so we're going to move on the agenda to our sustainability coordinator update. I believe we have Matt Zedek here, and there he is. Hi, Matt.
Good evening.
You are here to talk to us. Good evening. Metro West Solar and Clean Heat Challenge, as well as the Eversource Main Street Energy Efficiency Program. So go ahead, Matt. The floor is yours.
Great. And with your indulgence and Chris Mayo's support, I have a short presentation just to help work through the program. Again, it's the Metro West Solar and Clean Heat Challenge. Very excited. Next slide. What is the program? It's an opportunity for residents and small businesses to install solar air source heat pumps and/or ground source heat pumps. It's 4 communities working together. It's the towns of Holliston, Ashland, City of Framingham, and the town of Natick. And by joining together, we're going to be receiving some nice benefits. The program's success is going to be in large part because of a competitive bid process we've completed. We did that to generate competitive pricing, to make sure we had a good marketing plan developed for the program with the support of our installers, made sure we had experienced vendors that could help provide the services. And the end result was selecting 3 vendors, and I'll have more on that in a future slide. And again, the program has a 6-month duration. It'll be running through the end of this year at a minimum, based on similar programs across the Commonwealth. Occasionally, those are extended if there's a lot of interest in the program and additional opportunities to get these clean energy technologies out there. Next slide, please. Why is it needed? I'm going to read this quote. It's from the Building Sector's report of the Massachusetts 2050 Decarbonization Roadmap Study. According to the 2017 Massachusetts Greenhouse Inventory, on-site combustion of fossil fuels in the residential and commercial building subsectors are responsible for 27% of statewide greenhouse gas emissions in the Commonwealth. It was just about 10 days ago, Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Theoridis, was out in Westboro speaking at a 495 partnership gathering about climate change and resiliency. And it was just really nice to hear her talking of these type of technologies, the secretary talking about heat pumps and going solar. So the timing's really good. She also pointed out that the Commonwealth is going to be the first in the country to have a commission on clean heat that's currently being established. That's in sync with the climate bill that was passed pretty recently. Next slide, please. Why now? The timing is great for this program. As we know, there's been a sea change in Washington in terms of approach to acknowledging climate change. An example of that is on January 27th, the new president signed an executive order on tackling climate crisis at home and abroad, just really looking at the total nature of the challenge we face. We also had the climate bill passed in Massachusetts. We were very fortunate to have the great leadership of Senate President Karen Spilka and our state representative Carolyn Dykema help lead the charge in the legislature. And we're very pleased that Governor Baker, he also worked hard on this with his administration. They signed the legislation into law on March 26th. It's also why now there's good incentives, tax credits, and loans out there to help folks transition to these new technologies. And the timing is also good because we're emerging from the pandemic. The May 29th increased reopening, the fact that you're sitting there without masks, and the fact that our installers have additional experience as a result of the pandemic so that they're able to provide remote assessments as well as in-person assessments is going to benefit us all. Next slide, please. So the project goals, again, to promote clean energy. An example on the solar side, it's just great to whenever you can generate renewable energy locally, that's the best. On the heat pumps, again, the heat pumps, they help move air to heat and cool our homes and businesses as compared to relying on fossil fuels that you've got to burn to generate the heat or cooling. Cost efficiencies, that involves the fact that by joining together with the 4 communities, we've got more competitive pricing that we were able to secure. It also means for those who get involved in the project as customers, energy or utility bills can be reduced for residents and businesses. To simplify the process means that by joining together, we've vetted these installers as partners to work with our residents and small businesses as compared to a resident on your own or a small business on your own trying to work your way through the mass of businesses that are trying to promote these type of technologies. There's also, as a result of this process, the pricing and the terms are going to be consistent that we've negotiated throughout the length of the program. Short and long-term benefits, of course, were a big part of the goals. In the short term, those that install the clean energy technologies benefit, as we can imagine. The campaign's also to educate people for the long term. For instance, if you have an oil or gas furnace that is somewhat new or has some years left on its life, it may not be the time for you to install heat pumps. But by learning about the importance of them and why they're valuable and the cost effectiveness due to the continued reduction in prices of these technologies, you'll be educated through this campaign and be better prepared to make the right choice when it's your time. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the procurement process before. To help kick us off, we researched similar programs done in other towns, but also other regional efforts. And most of those were done when the state was more active in trying to promote those type of programs through the Clean Energy Center and Solarize programs. At the same time, we didn't want the fact that the state has backed off on some of that assistance at the moment, and actually as a result of the climate bill, they're going to be re-engaging some of that support, so that's very exciting. We didn't want to slow us down when we started this, the research months ago, and really pleased that Ashland helped lead the way developing and conducting the RFP process. Really want to thank their procurement officials for that help. As a result, we ended up with 10 proposals for the 3 different technologies. And those proposals came in from 9 different vendors. We had one vendor who wanted to work with our communities for 2 of the technologies. Then we established a review committee to review the proposals and rate them. This involved 2 members from each of the 4 communities on the review team. Really want to thank volunteers Joan Levinson and Rich Rosenberry, who helped with the evaluations, as well as our facilities director, James Keast, who lent a hand in evaluating the proposals. References were checked. Then we met with the top proposers to seek out additional clarifications and do some additional negotiating. And we're at the stage now where the installers were selected and contracts have been signed by each of those 3 vendors. Next slide, please. So the solar vendor that was selected is Ace Residential Solar, known as Ace Solar. They're out of North Andover, been in business since 2015. Significant experience in similar initiatives such as the Solarize Outer Cape that involved several communities out, including Provincetown, Wellfleet, Truro, and the Solarize Mendon Upton has been in the papers a little bit. That project's just about to wrap up for the residents in those couple of communities. And the main things they're going to be helping us with are rooftop ground-mounted solar systems, as well as battery storage services. Next slide, please. On the air source heat pump, the vendor is New England Ductless. They're located out of Milton, been in business since 2015. Again, significant experience in similar programs, the Heat Smart Arlington Winchester campaign and the Heat Smart Concord Carlisle Lincoln campaign as 2 examples. Again, they're going to be helping our residents and businesses with ductless, often known as mini split type of air pumps, and the ducted air pumps as well. Next slide, please. And Achieve Renewable is the vendor selected for the ground source heat pump service. They're located out of Salem. 2008, they've been in business, experience with Heat Smart campaigns in several areas of the Commonwealth, as well as the local Solarize Mendon Upton. The major services, and you can see in the diagram to the right there, it's hard to get a picture of a ground source heat pump, but this diagram does a decent job of just quickly showing that the 2 main systems are either vertical loop or the horizontal type system. So you can, again, it's pretty obvious from the diagram which is which. Next slide, please. Just to round it out, the next steps are tonight, we'll hopefully get the board's endorsement of these contracts for these selected vendors. Spreading the word and generating leads in town from our businesses and residents who are interested in these technologies is really the key part. That's by word of mouth to your friends and neighbors. We've got great local media with HCAT, Holliston Reporter, and the Metro West Daily News. We'll be having lawn signs out there, so if you're interested in a lawn sign to help promote the program, that'll be great. And there'll be other marketing efforts done in conjunction with the installers. A key thing is going to be to check out the dedicated website that's been just about finally being finalized and has been created for this project, MetroWestCleanEnergy.com. That's going to be your answer place for information about the program, information about the different technologies involved, and it'll be an easy link to connect to the dedicated site for each of the 3 installers for this program, and that's where they'll have the particulars for the discounted rates and the type of technologies that are involved. On the volunteer side, we have some needs. Again, I've mentioned some of the help so far along the project, in key part. If you happen to have, you live in town and you happen to have solar panels or a heat pump and might be interested in offering a testimonial about how that's worked for you, that's welcome, or potentially even hosting an open house so that we can have other residents come and check out your what you have at your home. That would be helpful. If you happen to have professional expertise in some of these areas, a retired electrician that worked on panels or something of that nature, or you have a background in the fields, that can also be helpful for our program. You can potentially be a coach or an advisor to help other residents as they're trying to learn about these technologies and know what to put in. And if you have an interest, also, you can help with some upcoming events. We're going to try to get out there now that we're starting to be able to have live events, such as at the farmer's market. Mr. Blair was nice enough to offer up a table for the program down there. So that'd be another nice opportunity. And then lastly is the upcoming Meet the Installers virtual event. This will be a great opportunity to learn more about the program, meet the installers, hear about their backgrounds, and ask some questions. That is going to be coming up on Thursday, June the 17th at 7 p.m. Next slide. That was it. So with that note, again, I appreciated the board's previous support before we conducted the procurement process. We're very pleased with the response, with the number of vendors, the expertise in the background with the vendors. They had significant interest in working with the 4 communities in the metro, in our Metro West area. And again, the timing is really, is working out well. Happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the time.
Okay. John, do you have any questions?
I do have a couple. Good evening, Matt. How are you?
Hi.
So Matt, these vendors, this RFP, it was prepared to make it easier for residents to come in contact with certain types of vendors in our area that provide these renewable types of solutions. Now, are these, does this contract, does this RFP include fixed costs or any costs that homeowners and businesses could look at to estimate the value of what these vendors are providing, or is that on a case-by-case basis?
The pricing provided by the vendors is what it is. It's in terms of the, based on the type of equipment that's used. There are a lot of variables involved in terms of what the actual cost for a homeowner or a business would be. So basically the vendors, we had pricing sheets as one of the components of the RFP. Vendors submitted their prices accordingly. We ranked them. That was one of the major factors in how we ranked them out. And what we're going to want to do is have, because of the so many variables involved in this type of these type of technologies, A, and then B, the variables involved in the differences from one home to the next, or the one business to the next. Our goal is to direct the residents and businesses straight to these selected vendors, go right to the experts, and they're there to try to make it happen. So that's where most of the details on the numbers are going to be, is right with the vendors, and we're providing the backup and quality control to make sure that the vendors are doing the job working with our residents.
So that leads to my second question. This does not prohibit homeowners or small businesses from using other vendors that provide these type of services. This is just a pre-screened group of vendors presented to homeowners and small business owners as a quicker way to identify somebody who is certified to provide the service, correct?
That is an excellent summary of what the project is, in terms of, we want to provide a vetted, well-researched option for residents and small businesses in our communities. This is not the only option for them. That's the last thing any of us would ever suggest, but we feel really good that we've simplified the process, and they're going to have a easier way to work with this particular, if they go with the vendors that we have, that's fine. If they work with somebody else and they've been able to negotiate a better deal, in part because of our program, that seems like a win-win to me. I know I was contacted just to, yeah.
So my last question is, are the vendors prepared to explain to homeowners or small businesses any opportunities they might qualify for grants or subsidies or some other form of a price break for any of these investments?
That was a key question that it was a point of emphasis in the RFP document, that's what we were looking for these vendors to do. And secondly, it was a point of emphasis in our evaluation of the vendors to see how they responded. And it was a big part of our follow-up in meeting when we met with the top vendors, to make sure that they could adequately and proficiently explain the different incentives and funding opportunities to lower the costs for our residents and businesses. We actually had them, the top couple from each technology, give us sample contract, show us an example of a contract that they recently completed in a community, and then show how the pricing would have worked out for that resident if they had actually used the pricing that we secured through our bidding process. And that's partly why we were able to vet the vendors and know that we're getting below market pricing for through this program. So that was a good process.
I don't have any more questions, but I have two comments. Number one, Matt, when we hired you, this was the kind of program that I always envisioned a sustainability coordinator would get knee deep in. I think this is a home run program. I thank you, the Roseberries, and all to Ashland for pulling it together. As a homeowner who's been approached by a variety of different door knockers over the years. This does take a lot of the guesswork out of it. There's a little bit of a less of a barrier to understanding alternative engineering resources and solutions. Thank you so much for doing it. I think it's a great resource for the community. I'm hoping this will be put up on our website so people can read it and know where to go with their questions. And I thank you for that. My next comment is really around something we talked about earlier, Tina, and that is to the extent that any of these programs yield projects that could touch upon ARPA, Matt, if you could keep in touch with Travis. This type of work is covered under the ARPA scope, and depending upon where it lands, how it lands, I think we should know about it. So stay in touch with Travis on those. But Matt, well done. 4 stars. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to reiterate Mr. Cronin's comments and say thank you, Matt, for all this work. I think this stuff is great. It's really exciting to see these kinds of projects and opportunities for residents to participate in. I do have a couple questions as well. The first one is, could you touch on the fact that this program is going to be for 6 months? Could you elaborate a little bit about what that looks like? Is it just it sort of ends, or like, you know, the prices change? Like, what happens after 6 months?
Good question. It takes a while to build the leads, to do the assessments, to work with for the installers to work with folks on the different fund, to try to make sure the different incentive and loans and other funding mechanisms are in play in a coordinated way. So in researching other programs, we knew that we wanted to have a significant amount of time for the project to happen, but we didn't want it to be too long, because then we sense that the vendors may not work as hard at trying to generate business in our communities if the program is extended too long. So that we sort of, based on research, settled in on the 6 months, but knowing that some of those programs have actually extended beyond their original life because there's a lot of activity still going on in the community at the end of, like in our case, it would be 6 months. So to your point, if it is 6 months, it's basically, however, we want to get as many people signed on the contracts as by the end of that 6 month period. And then they would, as long as the contracts are signed, even if it's a month or two later, the pricing would still be in effect, even if the project was put in February. Especially the ground source heat pump technology, it's a much more in depth. It's the most efficient type of system you can put in, but it's also a far more involved, lengthy process. So that was a request from the ground source heat pump installers. Hey, if we can't get everything installed in time, is that going to be okay if we continue on? And we agreed to that. So it's a long-winded answer, but basically it takes a while to ramp up getting the leads generated, get the assessments done, and we want to make sure there's plenty of time to have installations made as well. A key thing on that was vetting the vendors to make sure they have enough staff to do the job for our 4 towns.
Okay. Are the vendors planning to sort of share some information, even like high level, like on number of people who are participating in or a number of projects that they've completed?
So we're going to be getting weekly updates on the number of leads that they've received, how the follow-up is going on. We're going to be monitoring them on a regular basis because they're our partners. But again, we checked other programs, and that's what you want to do. We also will be doing some quality control, sort of auditing of our vendors to make sure they're doing the job. Roughly 1 out of every 10 projects will be doing an assessment to make sure that they're following up well with the party that they're working with. Involved with that is, especially because the heat pump technology is a little bit even more technical than the solar side. We have a third-party vendor who's going to be helping to review some of those audits to make sure the heat pump vendors are doing a good job for us.
Okay. One other thing. So one thing about that is I'd love to see some sort of like frequent updates, even if it's like monthly or something like that, on how many leads we've got and how many projects are moving forward and things like that. But then my last question is, do we have goals in mind or some sort of a method of measuring the success of this program?
obviously, you know, getting people involved is certainly what we want to do, but are we expecting 10, 1,000? Do we have sort of some numbers? I'm not saying you have to give us the numbers, but I'm just sort of saying, have we created some sort of like expectations for what we hope this program will provide?
No. And to flesh that out a little bit more, that's based on talking to the other folks who have done similar programs. They said, whatever you do, don't try to guess how many, because you'll never know. We had no idea. Secondly, related to that is we're coming out of a pandemic and everything is still out of sorts. There's so many variables involved. It's hard to know. And then lastly is there may be new incentives that develop in the next couple months that may change the numbers for some folks, and it may make it so it's actually, you know, they can get a quicker rate of return on their investment. So there are just a lot of variables. And I know that going to John's earlier point about, you know, partly why I came on board, it was definitely one of the first things I heard from a lot of people was like, hey, we haven't really had a solar campaign here in town. We hear about them in other places, and we need to improve these technologies. So I think the town is ripe for this. And I think we've got the elements in play for a successful program. And just to your point, we'll make sure we come in with regular updates. And that'll be an important part of the process.
That would be great. And I would also like to something John touched upon with ARPA. I think it'd be great if we could sort of look into finding ways to anything, or even looking to. I mean, personally, I'd love to see more. If any of these or grants or ARPA could help us with some of our municipal facilities as well. You know, that might be further down the road, but I'd love to see, you know, thinking about some of those kinds of opportunities for the town as well.
Nonprofits in this community.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you very much, Matt. I really appreciate the time.
Okay. Yep. Matt, you had said that you were looking for endorsement from the select board. Anything beyond that, or just this is a great program and thank you for initiating it?
Yeah, supporting. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Travis was just going to mention, I think, go ahead.
No, even though it feels like we're talking, but there is a delay, I guess, that showed that. So there are 3 agreements that I would execute. So I would look for the board to authorize me to execute the agreements that are mentioned here and were provided to you previously. And if there's anything Matt wants to add to that.
So Matt, I got Ace Solar. I did not get the full name of the next 2. Douglas,
New England, Douglas, and Achieve Renewable Energy.
Achieve Renewable Energy?
Yes.
Okay, before we move on to that, is there anything the board can do specifically that would help this program be successful? Are you looking for anything else?
At the moment, no. But again, what those at the end of the presentation, I mentioned just along with others, spreading the word, supporting the some of the marketing initiatives, such as with Ann's help in the water department, we've got the okay for a street banner that the vendor is going to be paying for and putting up the week of the 14th, I believe, of June to help promote the program. But all the vendors mentioned that one of the key elements in marketing the program in other places in the Commonwealth was having an insert in the water bill. So that would be another thing that will be very helpful to get the word out, and the cost on that would be paid for by the installer. So that was a key thing. Again, the fact that the Commonwealth wasn't able to really contribute as much because they're not supporting these programs at the moment was we knew that we didn't want to use town resources, and we focused on having the installers provide marketing support and commitments. So that's going to be a big part of the program.
Okay, and so Travis, are we all set to get the insert into the next water bill? Great. Are you presenting anything down at the building inspector's office for people coming in doing renovations and new builds?
I haven't thought of doing any presentations. I've spoken to Mark about 2 things. Just making sure he's aware of the program because he's probably going to have some increased business, which is, again, a nice trickle-down impact for the town. But also the fact that all of the installers, when we met with them, And we asked what we could be doing. One of the key things they said is, we want to meet with your inspectional folks because different towns can sometimes view these projects differently. We really want to understand the specifics of each of your 4 communities. We want to meet up with your inspectors right at the beginning of the program. So that's going to be in the work and in the works for the next week or 2.
Okay. Any questions from the Zoom call on the Metro West Solar Solar and Clean Heat Challenge? Okay, so then I'm looking to entertain a motion to accept the contract.
Yep, to authorize the town administrator to execute the agreements with the selected vendors.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
All right.
Aye. All right. Matt, thank you.
I believe we have one other update that I kind of had a primer on last week, but
So, Matt, you're also here to talk to us about the Eversource Main Street Energy Efficiency Program.
Yes, a nice lead time project, especially because it's in sync with the program that we just talked over. Because again, a focus that the board asked me to do from the outset when I was hired, and I've enjoyed doing, is trying to make sure we support our small business community in town. So again, before this energy efficiency program came around, we did provide some assistance by helping to lower the rate for those businesses that are part of our community choice aggregation program, to help save some funds there. And this program being run by Eversource, the Main Street Energy Efficiency Program, will be another step towards helping our small businesses. So basically, for the week of June 7th through the 11th, Eversource will be having their contracted vendor, Rise Engineering, visit several streets in town with a heavy load of small businesses. Prior to that, actually, Chris was nice enough to put up a postcard that is being mailed to the businesses in the town that will be arriving this week, talking about the different services that Rise through Eversource will be providing to make our businesses more energy efficient. So you can see on the screen, I don't need to repeat this, but the different services being offered. But in general, they're going to be probably doing a few smaller efficiency measures on site when they're out that week of June the 7th through the 11th, but they'll also, from their assessments, probably be needing to be come back to work on some of the bigger picture efficiency projects that just need additional resources for. So again, the postcard will be coming out this week to the businesses. We'll have a banner going up on Washington Street announcing the program, and then Rise Engineering will be having their folks out walking the streets of Washington Street, Central Street, Hopping Brook Road, October Hill Road, and Highland Street. So looking forward to that. And again, it's sort of combines with the other program in that you want to make sure your business is efficient. You don't want to be wasting money spending resources on heat or cooling your place if it's not tight, if it's not insulated. So these are important steps to improve energy efficiency and help businesses save money. And again, as John had mentioned before, there are incentives in play, and that's where using these experts to tap into the incentives is a key part of the program.
Thank you, Matt. John, any questions?
No, thank you.
Ben? My only question would be, like, earlier, the comment about ARPA and the challenge, same thing here. So if there's a way in which ARPA funds can be used to facilitate this, I think that's an idea well worth exploring. And I see your 2 biggest fans are on the call. Hi, Joe. Hi, Rich.
Hi.
So any comments
Yes,
from the Zoom call?
I do. I have
Your
one.
name?
I'm Joan Levinson, 66 Jawbrook Road. I just want to thank the Select Board for supporting this program. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank Matt for the tremendous job that he has been doing on this program. Thank you, everybody.
Goes for me too.
I think it's echoed here from this table as well. Any other comments? All right, Matt, great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, I think that ends most of our agenda with the exception of board business. We have a request for driveway expansion 10 Shaw Farm Road. Travis, you want to introduce that?
Sure, so I put this in the packet. It's been reviewed by DPW, who supports it, in review, and, requires a select board approval. As you see here, there's a diagram, which was obviously reviewed as well by, DPW. They put together a write-up for you to explain the reasoning, and it just requires an approval from the board.
And DPW is out at the site to take a look at it.
Yes, they reviewed this request.
Okay. Any questions or comments, John or Ben?
I support it. It's fine. DPW's okay with it. I'm okay with it.
So I'll entertain a motion to increase the driveway of 10 Shaw Farm Road as described in the letter to the board.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that carries. So then we are moving on to the end of our meeting here with other business. John?
I'm good right now.
Okay. Ben?
Just a quick follow-up. You weren't here last week, Tina, to talk about it, but we're meeting with Stantec to talk about the sidewalk study next Monday. We're going to have a call with that. One of the questions that came up was complete streets, and that'll be part of the conversation to make sure that's integrated into the product. John and I had discussed possibly having them in front of the board to present their findings when they're ready. Probably, I can't give a date until I talk to them, but I would assume probably either early July, something of that nature. But I'll ask what they're looking at, and I can certainly bring that back. But I wanted to just sort of follow up on that from last week.
Do you remember when we put in the application for the shared streets and spaces grant back in July, August of 2020? There were 3 projects that we had put forward. We were approved for one of the 3, which is Front Street. The other 2 were crosswalks on Washington Street at Pleasant Prospect and Linden Street. I don't know when Shared Streets and Spaces closes for their second, or actually their third, in a winter one, their third round of applications. That would be one time-sensitive thing that I wouldn't want to get tied up in a Stantec talking to Green International and coming to talk to the board.
Okay.
So if you're meeting with them on June...
It's next Monday. So what I
Okay.
can do, that's a great point. Maybe what I can do is we'll find out when those grants are they're closing out, and maybe we can ask them specifically if they can give us any recommendations or anything that they think that we can do sooner, so we can bring them in front of you as quickly as possible.
I'm sorry, are you meeting with them on June 7th or June 14th?
June.
Oh, okay, all right. That would be helpful. I don't think they have to be connected, but I don't want to wait for one thing.
Yeah, if there's something there, if they think there's something that could be an opportunity, maybe we could explore it and put something together if we have the bandwidth, and maybe they can help us with that. So that's a great point. I think that's not that, but I'll bring that up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all I have for other business.
Okay, and then the only other, I had one comment, which is, having just finished town election, town meeting, and then our Memorial Day parade, which was the first time we've really gathered as a community in that way in over a year. I think a lot of thoughts, at least mine did, turn to the 300th anniversary for the town of Holliston, which will be 2024. And looking at the fantastic job that Steve Bradford and his group did in planning the parade, you realize that there's a lot of planning that goes on. We visited cemeteries as a part of the day and the ceremony. So also thinking that as we look to 2024, the 300th anniversary, this board is going to want to start to plan. I think the next step, it feels right to say that the next step would be to form a committee, a planning committee, but I'm open to ideas and comments and thoughts.
I think we all received some mail from Mary Greenville some months ago who had an experience with the 1970-something. And it sounds like an epic event. I would think that pulling off something like this is gonna take an enormous amount of planning and money, fundraising. So, in addition to creating a committee, I think we need to consider appropriating money towards the events as well. It's not just to seed it, to hire or deal with some unexpected costs and so forth. I think before we take any steps to form a committee, we might want to think about something more formal, perhaps in the fall town warrant, to create such a group, formalize it. But I'd certainly like to hear more about the experience of what this kind of group will have to undertake. It's not a full event. It's going to take a few years to pull it off. So to me, it's a little bit more than just forming a charge and getting a bunch of volunteers and see if it goes well. There's a lot to do, and there's some specialty behind it. So I'd like to maybe receive some interest, maybe look at some appointments, perhaps some funding associated.
I would also expand on that too, just sort of see like what other communities have done, if there's any opportunity, like ideas or getting creative
Yeah.
about that kind of thing. Think about it as it's a special event, and want to do something special and memorable and exciting that brings the community together. I think would be really impactful.
I don't know the history well enough in the area to know who else is older than Holliston in our region to have held. I feel like Medway is a year or two older or a couple of years older. Did Medway have a 300? Do you know the year?
5 years ago.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, just like what other, some other ideas, do a little research before we start putting something together. What we
Okay.
need to do.
So it sounds like there may be an October town meeting article out there or something like this, so something that we should have on the agenda to talk about.
Why don't we invite Mary Ann? She gave us a lot of
Yeah.
material. Maybe she'd be a good running start to learn more about what happened back then. And if she wants to recruit anybody else to join her for our call so we can learn something, just put on the agenda and see if we can solicit a little bit of the historical perspective of what happened and what we can expect going forward.
That'd be great. All right. Well, seeing no other comments, unless there's anybody on the Zoom call who has a final word to say, we will move to close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Holliston. Thank you for coming.